to rule except to confirm it. So obviously she made a decision up here with regard to a public license issue down here. She raised a checkbook and said, I'm here to pay. There's no dishonor. Had she waited for the judge to say, well, we're finding you guilty, then it was not decided outside the court. She is in a contempt because she had to rely on the judge to settle something that she didn't bring as a settlement. When she raised her checkbook, was she electing to pay out of the public bank or out of the private bank? Public bank. It's a checkbook. And the judge is saying, well, she's going to pay in this jurisdiction, which means there's no problem. We will let her keep her license. She's honorable. She's acting like a trustee, even though she's transparent. She's acting for the beneficiary in the trust. So we're going to put her in honor, even though she's using the public system to pay the fine on the public privilege. But the judge didn't sanction her with points. Yes?
What would be the difference? What would be the difference in her sending the payment in?
Who would be the difference of her just sending the payment in and the judge, they accepting the payment without her?
That is a very good question. In the public, where does the court operate? In the courtroom, in open court. If she sent the payment in, where was the transaction transacted? Outside the court administratively. For instance, if there is a criminal process going down against a straw man, the first thing the court will do, since it's setting a contract, like we said yesterday, it will establish the parties. Who's here? Who's representing who? Then the court will attempt to set the jurisdiction. The court judge wants to always direct the contract toward the public venue jurisdiction. Unless you are capable in honor of bringing the jurisdiction of your contract into the private. He will attempt at least 2 to 3 times to get it here. If you're good and you're in honor, he will go, well, let's just go on to the next thing, which is leaving the field of battle. When one of the contestants leaves the field of battle, what does that mean? He's defaulted and the win goes to the other side. So remember, there's such a thing as the contract or the court case, and like Brandon was telling you yesterday, there's little agreements that you go to along the way, and the summation of the agreements then determine the outcome of the whole contract. So one of the agreements is, who are you as a party? Another agreement is, what jurisdiction are you holding your contract in? And as these agreements get established, they move on in the overall direction of settling the commercial claim. So in these criminal cases, the judges go, well, who are you? Are you here properly? And then tries to set a jurisdiction. And then the judge says, we're here today, not for the trial, we're here for first appearance arraignment. How do you plead to the charges? But before he says that, there's something very important. Do you waive the reading of the charges? What's that got to do with anything? If they don't read the charges publicly into the court case, they're not there.
The record. They need to read them into the record for you to get your remedy.
They're not there. Because the court case is the proceedings in the open public hearings. It's got to be there. When you waive it, let me put it this way. If an attorney is appearing for your defendant, your straw man, or if they appoint an attorney to represent your straw man, then you are incompetent. What happens to this case in the criminal when the attorney waives the reading? What just happened to the case? Say what? Guilty? Oh no, there's no guilty yet.
He only says one thing. Your attorney can only say one thing, not guilty.
No, we're not at the pleading yet. We're at the issue of waiving the reading of the charges openly in court. After he waives them, then they will say, how do you plead?
Giving up all his rights.
Giving up what rights? What public rights? What happens to this case if they don't read it into the record? That's going to be different if they do read it into the record.
One's the public side, one's the private side.
You got it. Did you hear what he said? One is the public side and one is the private. If they read the charges into the record, what are the charges?
Let me ask you a question, Jack.
If they don't read them, what are the charges? Private.
I understand that about a criminal situation, but let's say if I'm in a courtroom on a mortgage and there was a plaintiff and I'm the defendant, so to speak, should I call them to read the charges into the record on a civil case?
In a civil case, do they ever?
No. Should they?
So every civil case is private. It has nothing to do with public.
Could we demand they read the civil case as in charging me with not paying the mortgage or something?
Let's go back and decide what this means. We were talking last night, some of us, and we said this domain up here is private. And we said this domain down here is public, right? But is there such a thing as private-private, private-public?
Public international law, private international law.
Could it be that your private affairs might affect some kind of a public interest? Like paying your utility bill on the private side. Is it possible it could be private-private? Maybe a negotiation with Internal Revenue Service over some kind of discharge of a tax liability involving the straw man. Yeah. Down here, we could be public-public, and we can be public-private. Now remember, as far as their charges are concerned, aren't their charges coming out of the public? Yes. But what we just said is if they read those charges openly, verbally into the record, in the court case before the pleading, that's a public-public prosecution. If they don't read them, it's public-private. What the hell is the difference? What is the purpose of that King's Court? What are they there for?
Raise revenue.
Raise the revenue. So if it was a public case, where would the revenue go? To the public. If it was a public-private case, where would the revenue gained by that conviction go? Private. These are admiralty cases. It takes two things to bring a proper charge into the court. It takes a security offer and it takes a bond. Because you need both the title and the money.
What did we say a security was?
Agreement between the parties. They're making you an offer in the charges.
Any evidence of debt or ownership.
Okay, so in the charge they've got to bring a monetary statement or invoice what you need to actually fulfill the contract offer of the charge. How can they bring a charge against you? You murdered someone. Oh, we're just going to jump to you die. There's no remedy? What did Pinocchio say to Shrek? There's got to be an escape clause. The escape clause is the monetization of the security agreement so you could pay the debt and go home.
It's said in a court case, a judge quoted thus, "Few, if any, intelligent and well-educated laymen are schooled in the science of law, and if charged with a crime are capable of determining for themselves whether the indictment is good or bad. They are unfamiliar with the rules of evidence, lacking both the skill and knowledge to adequately prepare their defense, even though they may have a perfect one. They require the guiding hands of counsel at every step of the proceeding. Though they be not guilty, they face the danger of conviction because they do not know how to establish their innocence. If this be true of a man of intelligence, how much more true it is of those without adequate schooling and experience." So what Jack's telling you is, wow.
You have no idea what's going on. Did you realize that when the straw man got the ticket, he was supposed to stay completely out of it, and you were supposed to go to your trustee to resolve it? Did you understand that before this weekend? Because you're down here trying your damnedest to put some paperwork in that court to cause something to go away, or you're ignorant and you're hiring an attorney, and the attorney representing the beneficiary has no capacity to do anything other than to negotiate an agreed settlement with the trustees, which is what about 99% of every criminal court case ends up being. A negotiation between these two parties to pay some fine or do some time so that you can set off the damn charges and let it go away because you have no concept of who you are, what you're doing, what they're doing, or how to get your remedy.
Now you said set off the charges, Jack. You didn't say pay, right?
Well, if you go to prison, that's involving living people, and that's a set-off because they're actually coming to the equivalent of your asset account to do that because you're just in there as the bond or the surety, security for that payment as you work it off in time. So what you got to understand is going on here is if you waive the reading into the court, it is not a public criminal case. So the state, the city, the national government does not get the profits. If they read it into the public, the next thing that you would request that the judge do is have the prosecutor bring in a public bond. A public bond is a debt instrument, not an asset. And the public bond is the monetization, the statement that you can do an acceptance for value to set off, settle, and close.
Hey, Jack?
But these courts are not doing anything for the government. They're doing everything for private investment.
I keep hearing you bring up this word monetize or demonetize. Does that mean to make legal tender?
It means to set it off with some accounting that comes from a bank in the public or a bank in the private.
When Jack tells you to if they're going to monetize or you're going to monetize the banker's acceptance, is to make legal tender.
Legal tender is that which legally has the effect of discharging or setting off a debt. They can't tell you to use a public bank or a private bank. The choice is yours. And so in any of these examples, Gordon's been talking about a court case. Do we care what it is that is charging your straw man? Do we care whether it's a murder? Do we care whether it's a robbery? Do we care whether it's a tax payment that wasn't made? Do we care whether it was a lack of payment in support of your child in the divorce hearings?
Are the facts on the moon?
It's just a debt. It's an account. All you have to do is agree to allow them to zero that account.
Now, they're not going to do it just voluntarily and ha got us. It's going to be a very animating contest for them to get you into the public side and off at a private side. They're not going to, and they're never going to admit you're right. Not through their words, but through their actions they will. So it's a little difficult to get your mind around it. And when Jack's telling you that it isn't just simple as 1, 2, 3, but it is as simple as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
If we waive the reading of the criminal charges in the public session of the courtroom on the first appearance, it could even be a traffic case. If you waive them, behind the scenes, the clerk has to put a bond into that case. Every admiralty case needs a bond. If the bond isn't coming from the city, the state, the county, or the Fed, and it's a private case, who's putting up the bond? Who wants to make money off of you? How about Walmart? They'll put up the bond. Whoever puts up the bond is going to make the money. It's going to make the profit off this case. So the profits are going to be shared by the judge, the legal system, and the private investor. That's what the courts are doing. Do you think the courts are funneling any money into the coffers of the city, the state, the county, and the feds? They do not support the states. Where does the state, the Fed, the county, and the city get their money to operate? Is it from taxes?
No.
Is it from court receipts? Hell no. Where do they get it?
Sales. Import. Tariffs.
They get it from grants. From the grantor, the Federal Reserve. That's what funds everything. State grants, sharing. All your government is already dictated from on top by the Federal Reserve committees. Who's going to get what? Which state's going to get what? How much? For what purpose? All of the receipts that are coming through taxes and all of this other stuff, with some minor exceptions, are going to do what? Pay the private investors. Why do you think they bought these bonds? So the court is not really interested in you creating a problem and forcing them to go into the public. If you had to force them to go into the public, isn't the public pretty much broke and couldn't put up a bond anyway? Most likely.
Are you telling me, Jack, that if I go in there on a criminal case and ask them to read them into the record and then demand the original charging and or accusatory instrument together with the public registered bond in support thereof, they're going to have a little difficulty doing so?
If you understand what you're doing and you can do it officially before the court on the record in such a way of not being in a dishonor, what you're doing now is once that public bond goes in, that's the debt instrument to accept for value, return for value. How can you accept an instrument of debt in a case in which it's private? Because remember, we've been telling you, or if we haven't said it here, your documentation where you settled the case in private, once you get it settled, where does that record have to go? Brandon's going to give you more of that information here as he does his administrative process. But where does that information go once you settle it in private?
The private side.
Goes into chambers with the judge, which is private. If this criminal case is private, where is the bond from Walmart or the investor?
Private side.
In chambers with the judge in the private side. He can see the documents. Can you see the private bond in the public records of the court?
Nope.
They're not there. You waived it when you didn't want it public. You are the captain of your ship, the leader of your soul. If you don't know how to contract and get these people to do what you are requesting them to do so you can handle the outcome, you have no idea what the amount of the bond is in order to do the A for V, to do the acceptance on it. It's all contract law.
How does that change in this civil case?
Okay, we're kind of not on the tape yet. I don't think we heard that. Are you on?
I can barely hear him.
Yeah. Try it again.
How does it change
There we go.
going from criminal to something civil?
Criminal is civil with a higher level of dishonor. Because obviously when the matter was civil, you chose to ignore it and not carry out your duties. So now the level of dishonor is raised to a point where the penalties for your not doing your job to solve this matter when it was civil have been raised. So a criminal is just a higher level than civil. It tacks on another penalty. So when we're working with people that are dealing in a criminal prosecution, you got to deal with the setting off of the criminal accounts that were set up. But in order to qualify to have those criminal accounts set off and zeroed, you got to go back and correct the foundational problem which always existed back in the civil world with these people before it went criminal.
We kind of tell you a little thing. We say criminal is nothing more than a civil penalty which is raised because the parties failed to resolve it at the civil stage or at the lower stage, what Jack is telling you. Our people that we get out of jail, a lot, and these contempt ones, what do? We merely go back and fix the underlying contempt. Or this recent gentleman, Bob from New Mexico, Bob Lester, he was on the Monday nights with us. He's in on a federal case. His situation was he'd filed some charges, what's known as tax form 8300s against the judge and 4 others involved in a state case. The feds brought charges against him. And he's in prison, he's not been gone to trial yet. What we did is went in and we fixed the underlying civil dishonor. The problem was he didn't understand that he needed to fix that so that there wouldn't be criminal charges or that the criminal charges could settle.
He needed to cancel the 8300s which were causing the problem to begin with. He needed to request forgiveness, and he needed to offer that if there were any damages monetarily to the party caused by his civil process, that he would stand behind those in full and reimburse any party that brought forth a claim of damages because of his mistake.
That's what we filed into his case, including he had a public defender. We had to remove that, and interestingly, things weren't going, it still wasn't moving. Once again, we know government always does it right. There was also still a state attorney public defender that had to be dealt with, even though it was a federal case. Rather interesting. So it was a kind of an interesting situation where when we went in and took care of the state one, and he immediately got, within 4 days, was brought back to New Mexico. Settlement was offered by the feds, and he even says on the Monday night they were not very happy about it. But you see, he'd resolved the underlying civil dishonor, and therefore the criminal dishonor could be settled.
Let me do something briefly that I did last night.
Got a question over here, Jack.
Qualify this. Go ahead first.
If the bar is private, can we go in the bar? And that's in front of the judge, right?
The bar is the British Accreditation Registry, and they're doing all their private law in there, which is before the captain of the vessel.
I think he's asking about the bar in the room itself, Jack. Is that what you're asking?
Well, if you go inside the bar, you better qualify why you're inside the bar. In other words, you've got to get their agreement that you're inside their foreign territory, but still maintaining the protections of your jurisdiction.
In other words, you have to, if I'm standing outside the bar, and I say I'm here today...
Mr. Gordon, you're the defendant here today. Please come on in the bar.
I'm here today as the authorized representative for the surety over the defendant, Gordon Hall.
Yeah. You know, that's all nonsense. I'm asking you to get in the bar here today. Are you going to get in the bar, or are you going to be in contempt?
So that I'm not in contempt of this court, I'll enter the bar as the authorized representative for the surety over the defendant.
Okay. Come on in here.
Let the record show that I'm entering the bar as the authorized representative for the surety over the defendant merely for the purpose of assisting this court in set-off settlement and closure.
Will you please get in the bar here then? I accept any condition you put. Just get in here.
The condition is merely for the purpose of set-off settlement and closure to receive have the public charges or have the charges read into the public record for set-off settlement and closure.
Hall,
let the record so show I'm coming on in. I'm in. Thank you.
Okay. Now, we can start doing... All he's got to do is make the record and make it apparent that coming in, he's under that jurisdiction.
Now what Jack just did, you notice, remember Jack, we had one of our students, he goes, may I come in the bar with all my rights reserved. The judge goes, come on in the bar. All your constitutional rights are reserved. That was a counteroffer, and he went in the bar. He said, let the record show. He had constitutional rights, which we know there's no such thing, merely privileges, and he had some problems.
So we don't want to be in the bar.
Yes, we do,
Yes,
if you have an agreement.
Under the proper circumstance. Now, sometimes the judge will be testing you. It depends on didn't Gordon tell you earlier that when it comes to court, you've got to be aware of the surroundings and what's happening right now, because cases are contracts and they move, they're dynamic. We've had judges tell people, get in here. They maintain their jurisdiction. The judge didn't object. Let the record show there's been no objection. The guy went to move into the bar and the judge goes, halt! And then he covers the case with the guy outside the bar. What just happened? The judge doesn't want your foreign jurisdiction into what he's going to do today inside the court. If that case is only going to be on the public side inside the bar today. He doesn't need anybody out here that's doing anything in the world of the Republic to be in his court. He's going to put on a really big shoe for the public, and it's going to all be a bunch of bull crap just so that everybody thinks the judge is in total control.
3 short stories for you, on long lines with Jack here. I was in with one of my clients over in L.A. He's sitting in... Matter of fact, this was a guy that started teaching me about this stuff in prison. And fast forward like 10 years, this guy was real bright, but he'd been partying, alcohol, and he's kind of a doofus after that, not paying attention to his stuff. We're sitting in court. He says, okay, what do I do, Gordon? He says, I'm here today as the blah, 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 blah. So we're sitting there, and they finally call the case. He stands up and he goes, I'm here today as the authorized representative. We have some other saying. I'm here today as the paramount security interest holder in all property and collateral. And the judge goes, what? He goes, I'm here today. The judge goes, just come on in. He just walks in. First mistake. Then the judge says, now get over there and sit next to your attorney. And he went over and sat down. Party over. Second witness. He said, excuse me, my son. He says, shut up. He had 4 marshals there. He's doing 17 years right now. He never got out. He didn't understand what he was doing. Number 2, we had a really cool one. We had a couple of doctors go into court. They introduced, and this is the one Jack just told you about. I'm here today, blah, blah, merely for the purpose. Judge says, come on in. Halt. They stood out there and held it. So it gets to be, I won't bore you with a third one, but I mean, you have to listen. Well, the last one is this guy in Arizona on a murder charge. And he says he's going to a competency hearing. Rule 11, they call it in Arizona. And I'm sitting in the gallery and watching him, and we've been doing real good. And he went to the first one by himself and screwed it up. And I wasn't there, and so I go to the second one with him. And he says, I'm here today. The judge goes, Mr. Song, just get in here. You know, just that kind of a tone. Just get in here, a little impatient parent type. He goes, he says, get in here. And he backs and he goes, I'm here today as the authorized representative. You know, and then he turns around and stands up facing the judge. And the judge says, now get over there and stand next to your attorney. Walks over and stands next to him. And he says, excuse me, Judge, can I say something? He says, no. He shut up and party was on.
He accepted the attorney by failing to object timely, and having an attorney made him incompetent, so the court can't hear him, and everything now has to go through the attorney. So he volunteered to be the debtor.
You're going to run into this in your cases, civilly or... Everything's civil. When you're in that courtroom, you better know who you are, and you better understand where you're entering.
Let me show you what's going on in the courtroom very simply. We're going to use this diagram in a different capacity right now than we used it yesterday. We used it yesterday to show you a macro of what's going on in society. Today we're going to do the following. This is you, the living man or woman, making decisions in your life. This is your trustee who has the capacity to access the asset bank account on the private side to set off, settle, and close things, okay? This beneficiary is not now the beneficiary of your estate per se, going to the shadow government. This beneficiary is some public entity that wants to get paid, okay? He wants to get paid like the utility bill that your straw man owes. What you can do is you can literally authorize your trustee to go ahead and either A for V it and pay this guy, or your trustee can elect to draw funds out of the straw man's bank account and pay this bill in the public. If you pay the bill, isn't the beneficiary happy? Doesn't he go away? Yes. Now, what happens if you don't pay the bill? If you don't pay the bill, is the beneficiary ticked off?
3 minutes.
You bet. Who is the plaintiff in every court case?
3 minutes, brother.
A ticked off beneficiary who's going to sue you down in their courts because you didn't pay his bill privately. See, you could pay it private, coming out of your asset account, or you can pay it public, coming out of the bank account for the straw man. But since you didn't pay it, he goes and files a court case down here in the public. The public court case is a reflection of your private process. The living man is the grantor to the trust with all the power. Guess what? The judge is the grantor in the case to a fictional mirror image process which is going to resolve your problem. The trustees down here in the public court case are the attorney for the defendant, the attorney for the plaintiff. And who is the beneficiary down here in the public court case? The mirror image of the beneficiary up there that didn't get paid. So what we're seeing here is the judge has all the power in the court case, appointing attorneys for the plaintiff and the defendant in order to get the beneficiary, the company you didn't pay, paid. What is this thing going on down here? It is a probate court. When do probate courts come into play? When the testator dies. When you did not pay this bill up here on the private side, you're
a man got fucked. Now, how is that for a story? Because that's the story of black people in America. Because that's the story of black people in America. Shit, you all don't know you black yet. You think you just people. Let me be the first to tell you that you are all black. The moment these Dutch motherfuckers set foot here and decided they white, and you get to black. The moment these Dutch motherfuckers set foot here and decided they white, and you get to be black, and that's the nice name they call you. Let me paint a picture of what's waiting for you on the shore. You arrive in America, land of opportunity, milk and honey, and guess what? You all get to be slaves. split up, sold off, and worked to death. And guess what? You all get to be slaves. Split up, sold off, and worked to death. The lucky ones get Sunday off to sleep and fuck and make more slaves and all for what? For cotton, indigo, for a fucking purple shirt. The only good news is the tobacco your grandkids are gonna farm for free is gonna give a shitload of these white motherfuckers cancer. And I ain't even started yet. 100 years later, you're fucked. Shitload of these white motherfuckers cancer. And I ain't even started yet. 100 years later, you're fucked. 100 years after that, fucked. 100 years after you get free, you still getting fucked out of job and shot at by police. You see what I'm saying? This guy gets it. I like him. He's getting angry. Angry is good. Angry gets shit done.
And you know this, man.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
Your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it listening to our show. But we want to make it even better, so we need your help. We're hoping you'll spend a few minutes taking our listener survey, courtesy of our sponsor, Nota by M&T Bank. Just go to LegalTalkNetwork.com/survey. Your opinions matter to us, so let us know what you like and what you don't. That's LegalTalkNetwork.com/survey.
Before we start, we'd like to thank our sponsors and broker, Posh Virtual Receptionists, and GoDaddy Domain Broker Service.
It's not always easy, Craig. I mean, this is a really hard field. It's a hard job. And, we care a lot about the people we work with. We hope that everyone is successful, but that's always not the case. And we just try the best that we can every single day.
Welcome to the award-winning podcast, Lawyer to Lawyer, with J. Craig Williams, bringing you the latest legal news and observations with the leading experts in the legal profession. You're listening to Legal Talk Network.
Welcome to Lawyer on the Legal Talk Network. I'm Craig Williams, coming to you from Southern California. I write a blog named May It Please the Court and have 2 books out titled How to Get Sued and The Sled. In our ongoing series, In the Life of a Lawyer, Start to Finish, we're exploring the experience of becoming and being an attorney, from applying to law schools through retirement and everything in between. On our last episode of the series, we discussed the business of law with attorney Christopher T. Anderson. On today's episode, we're going to move on to work-life balance. We're going to focus on the well-being of an attorney, addressing the lawyer's workload, judges' workloads, the stress of the profession, and how a lawyer can balance their personal and professional lives. And to do that, our guest today is Molly Rance. She is the program director for the Lawyers and Judges Assistance Program at the State Bar of Michigan. Molly is a fully licensed professional counselor and a board-certified addictions therapist. She is the co-host of the State Bar of Michigan On Balance podcast alongside Joanne Hathaway. Welcome to our show, Molly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start off talking about your work with the State Bar of Michigan. What is it that you do from a lawyer's perspective?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me again. And as you mentioned, I am the director of the Lawyers and Judges Assistance Program at the State Bar. I have been with LJAP for the past 11 years, I believe, and I've been in the director role for the past 2. I am so proud of our program and the services that we offer to law students, bar applicants, to lawyers, and to judges. LJAP is a confidential program. We provide free telephone consultations to legal professionals and their families. We perform clinical evaluations. We have a staff made up of a program coordinator and 2 excellent clinicians. We offer monitoring services for those attorneys who are struggling with mental health or substance use issues. We provide referrals to properly trained and credentialed providers. And a lot of what I do is provide professional presentations and educational outreach on topics pertaining to wellness or well-being.
Is your program duplicated in any other states? I mean, I'm here in California. I know that a lot of our listeners are not only in Michigan, but in other places, other states. Where can they find these resources?
Yep, that's an excellent question, Craig. So most every state in the country does have what we refer to as a LAP, or a Lawyer's Assistance Program. And you can actually find contact information for all of the LAPs on the ABA website. And there's a saying that if you know one lap, you know one lap. So, a lot of our programs function a little bit differently. Some of us, like Michigan, offer monitoring services. Some don't. Michigan offers monitoring services, but we also offer general wellness services. And so we are an excellent resource with a plethora of information for legal professionals.
How did you start out getting interested in this line of work? I mean, you've been doing it, at least for the Michigan Bar, for 11 years.
Yeah, so to be quite honest, I originally was not sure what I wanted to do. I graduated with...
So with that being said, just check this out. Because remember, if you listen long enough, you definitely will learn something.
Some people are really fucking stupid. Did you ever notice that? How many really stupid people you run into during the day? God damn, there's a lot of stupid bastards walking around. Carry a little pad and pencil with you. You wind up with 30 or 40 names by the end of the day. Look at it this way. Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that. And it doesn't take you very long to spot one of them, does it? Take you about 8 seconds. You'll be listening to some guy. You say, this guy is fucking stupid.
You can say what you want about this country, and I love this place. I love the freedoms we used to have. I love it. I love that. I love it when it didn't take a fucking catastrophe to get us to care for one another. I love the fact that we're on camera all the time from all angles. But you know what? You can say what you want about America. And I say I love this place. I wouldn't have it any other way. Wouldn't live in any other time in history and any other place. But say what you want about America. Land of the free, home of the brave. We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country. Dumbass motherfuckers. You know? These people are efficient, professional, compulsive consumers. It's their civic duty. Consumption. It's the new national pastime. Fuck baseball. It's consumption. The only true, lasting American value that's left, buying things. buying things. People spending money they don't have on things they don't need. Money they don't have on things they don't need, so they can max out their credit cards and spend the rest of their lives paying 18% interest on something that costs $12.50. And they didn't like it when they got it home anyway. Not too bright, folks. Not too fucking bright. But if you talk to one of them about this, if you isolate one of them, you sit them down rationally, and you talk to them about the low IQs and the dumb behavior and the bad decisions, right away they start talking about education. That's the big answer to everything. Education. They say we need more money for education. We need more books, more teachers, more classrooms, more schools. We need more testing for the kids. You say to them, well, you know, we've tried all of that, and the kids still can't pass the test. He says, don't you worry about that. We're going to lower the passing grades. And that's what they do in a lot of these schools now. They lower the passing grades so more kids can pass. More kids pass, the school looks good, everybody's happy, the IQ of the country slips another 2 or 3 points, and pretty soon all you'll need to get into college is a fucking pencil. Got a pencil? Get the fuck in there. It's physics. Then everyone wonders why 17 other countries graduate more scientists than we do. Hey, living in a coast-to-coast shopping mall? Well, they think it's just fucking dandy.
Hello everyone and welcome to the VRIC channel. My name is Jesse Day and today we are blessed to be joined by the president of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, somebody I always love talking to, Mr. Andy Schechtman. Good to see you.
Jesse, good to see you too, brother. Been too long. I'm glad our little chatting before we've jumped online here. Glad to hear you're doing well. You look good and thanks for having me. Look forward to actually seeing you in person here real soon in Vancouver, shaking your hand. But hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely, me too. And thank you very much for coming on. So I wanted to start with a more broader question, and that is, what are the major catalysts and tailwinds you're seeing for the precious metals here in 2023 as we kick off the year?
Well, you know, Jesse, maybe I've coined a phrase over the years saying that price is the greatest tool of misdirection. And although gold has done very well over the last few months, up over almost $200 from where it was a couple of months ago, and silver done very well too, in general, I don't think price gives us any indication of the level of demand. And, you know, I know we're going to talk about the BRICS, because I've been talking about that for 3 years now when no one else was. And to me, that is the ultimate driver of it. But let's sidestep that for a moment and just look at the fact that if price was an indicator of demand and of value, where, you know, the mainstream would say, hey, Andy, if gold and silver were so valuable, why in the midst of 40-year high inflation, why in the midst of a war in the Ukraine and just geopolitical and political chaos globe over, why has gold and silver not accentuated itself the way that gold bugs would assume it would? And that's a fair point. I get it. But what I would come back with, and it's hard for people to understand this unless you're digging, we have seen the greatest drawdown of physical supply from the COMEX and the London Metals Exchange that we've ever seen. We have the silver stockpiles on the London Metals Exchange, the lowest they've ever been in record, ever. Since they started keeping inventory records on the London Metals Exchange. We have seen silver draw down on the COMEX, where when I say draw down, I mean deliveries that leave the ecosystem, which I'm going to mention the significance of that in a second. Same thing with the London Metals Exchange. These were platforms that didn't traditionally entertain big deliveries, although it was something that could be done. It really never happened. In the past 18 months, we've seen a 70+% drawdown in the registered category of silver available for delivery on the COMEX market. The registered category are the bars that are available for delivery. And in February of 2021, we saw somewhere in the neighborhood of 140 million ounces, and now it's 33 or 34 million. So we've seen 100+ million ounces being delivered off of COMEX in 18 months. we've seen in one day, a month and a half ago, 45% of all of the kilo gold bars that back the mini contracts on the COMEX delivered, almost 26 million ounces in one day. We saw not too long ago, 5% of all the 100-ounce good delivery bars on COMEX delivered in one day. Who's got the kind of money to make this type of delivery? And when we take things off of COMEX, so without getting too deep, there's two categories on the COMEX exchange. There's registered, which are bars for delivery, and eligible. Those eligible bars could be in an account like mine, or in a hedge fund, or in a family office. They're bars that are eligible, meaning they're inside the ecosystem, their weights and purity have been validated, and they're in my personal storage account, which is eligible, but it is not for delivery. Now, if I want to make it deliverable, I put it into the registered category. So in any case, when you see deliveries that are not going from registered to eligible, but from registered to God knows where, pull these bars off of the COMEX ecosystem and they leave the walls of COMEX, they now have lost a good deal of their liquidity in terms of an industrial purchaser like Elon Musk saying, I'll pay everyone $12 an ounce premium for your 1,000-ounce bars, but I want them right now. Now, if you've taken them outside the ecosystem, to get them back in, to get them re-assayed and re-entered into the ecosystem is not only time impractical, but wholly cost impractical. And so when you see these deliveries, it's incredible. In fact, in the third quarter of 2022, we saw 400 tons of gold sent out off the COMEX market, 400 tons. And so, what was interesting about that 400 metric tons is that there was an article picked up recently by Bloomberg and by Reuters that said of all of these tons that were shipped, only 120 of those tons were validated. We know who bought it. The 280 or 280 tons or 2/3 of all of that gold that was shipped out, we didn't know who it was. It was unverified. And that 400 tons in the third quarter is roughly double the next biggest quarterly deliveries off of COMEX in history. And we're already at over 700 tons delivered for the year. There's still a couple of weeks left at the end of the year. I know that this is coming out a little bit later, but the point of it is that by the time people see this, the year will be over, and we will have already been way above the biggest year ever in terms of metals being shipped out of the country. It's very significant. Now, just the other day, China came out and said, we have been accumulating a whole bunch of gold. That these mystery buyers are those nations eastward, like the BRICS countries. And the article that Bloomberg and Reuters put out before China said, yes, we bought 40, 50 tons last month, Bloomberg surmised that it was would be Russia, China, India, and Saudi Arabia. Now, these are the BRICS countries because, as we do know, Saudi Arabia has already applied for a statement. And look, the bottom line is simply this. I guess what I'm getting at here is this. Price has been used as a tool of misdirection because the biggest money in the world is using that price to run cover for incredibly large deliveries that are literally draining from the top on down the biggest epicenters of supply, like the London Metals Exchange, like the COMEX. The biggest money in the world always front runs what is coming. They're always in position before the little guy figures it out, and they are using price as a tool through levered futures contracts to suppress the price, to allow them the ability, without being rated or without being called out, crowded out of the trade. They are emptying the shelves globally of all of the metal from the top on down and using price as a tool of misdirection. So what are the drivers? The drivers, to me, is that the biggest, most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed money in the world, the people closest to the information, are draining the exchanges and using suppression of paper to run cover for it. If you see that, then nothing else matters. All of the noise, the rhetoric, and the suppression of the paper price is being betrayed by the massive acquisition. And more relevant than the massive acquisition is the pulling these huge industrial-sized gold and silver bars, which really only have tremendous liquidity within the ecosystem, pulling them out, meaning it's a one-way delivery. These bars are leaving COMEX, they're leaving the London Metals Exchange. These bars are extremely expensive. They are only going to be accumulated by the most sophisticated buyers, and they're leaving, and they're not coming back. So to me, that is the driver. It is the movement of metal out of the system by the sophisticated investors. The rest is all just noise to me.
Well, let's shift to the BRICS nations currency. Because you've been talking about the end of the US dollar hegemony for a while, as well as this new BRICS nation currency, and supposedly it's going to be backed by commodities or perhaps gold. I don't know if we're totally clear on that yet, but do you think this new currency will actually come to pass, and how do you see that timeline playing out, and do you think it will stand a good shot of competing with the US dollar as a gold reserve currency?
The answer is yes to everything. In 2019, when the Bank of International Settlements reclassified gold as the world's only other Tier 1 reserve asset, let that sink in for a minute. Reclassified gold as the world's only other Tier 1 reserve asset next to U.S. dollars and treasuries, the only other one, it became very obvious to me that the acquisition and repatriation of gold by the world's central banks was more significant than people were quite understanding. When we saw shortly after gold was reclassified, or shortly prior to gold being reclassified, rather, the repatriation of gold from the New York Fed and the Bank of England by the Bundesbank, by the Bank of Turkey, Hungary, Poland, the Czech National Bank, the Bank of Austria, the Dutch National Bank, they all massively repatriated their gold and then went on a buying spree. And this has continued more or less since 2017, 2018, where we've seen this huge accumulation of metal. Now, when you talk about supposedly being pegged to gold, the Russian finance minister did come out not too long ago and said, we are going to issue a new reserve currency, we being the BRICS nations, and it will be a basket of local currencies, meaning Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, and whatever other countries have subsequently joined on, and a pegging of commodities to, as you mentioned, it's not clear if it's just gold or other commodities, to the currency. Now, where I have taken it a step further is looking at the success of the digital yuan, which has been going on now for several years, and it has been backing the infrastructure and the settlement of contracts on the new Belt Road Initiative, which is a huge deal. You know, it's the most ambitious infrastructure project in human history, and the Belt Road Initiative is something that people should not sidestep, should not ignore. All 13 OPEC producing countries are on the Belt Road. I don't remember how many countries, 140, 150, 160 countries have signed up to the Belt Road, which is connecting Asia, Africa, parts of Europe, and South America. You're talking the most ambitious infrastructure project ever attempted. Look at all of these pieces that are being put together. The connection of 75 to 80% of human population, a pegging of commodities to a new currency, gold being reclassified Tier 1, the RICS and BRICS, Russia, China, India, South Africa, they're the largest producers of gold and accumulators of it in the world. But if it's not just gold, you have countries like Saudi Arabia could pledge oil. You have all of these countries that are joining the BRICS nations that are Gulf Coast or oil-producing countries that are joining the BRICS nations, but way deeper than that. I mean, you could look at all of the countries that are pledging their desire to join BRICS, and they're all rich in commodities, whether it be rare earth metals, whether it be liquefied natural gas, whether it be oil, whether it be gold, whether it be silver, whether it be fertilizer, whatever it is. using the distributed ledger technology of the successful beta test, call it a 3-year beta test of the digital yuan, which has already exceeded 25 billion in settlements. They even rolled it out at the Winter Olympics in Beijing, worked just perfectly. So you have a digital yuan that works, that you could use as the rails of a new BRICS currency that will show the immutability and the authenticity of what is being pledged to the new currency. What better way to roll out a central bank digital currency than to have it in a cooperation with all of these countries that are joining, using commodities to peg to a new system. And, you know, it is the rallying cry against the Western hegemony, against the Western perceived hypocrisy that brings all of these countries to the table, including a whole slew of countries that you know, people aren't even talking about. Algeria, Argentina, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Nicaragua, Turkey, Indonesia, Senegal, Nigeria, Afghanistan, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia. It goes deeper into that, where you have now the countries in the BRICS Plus members, where you have Argentina, Nicaragua, you have Egypt, Algeria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Nigeria, Senegal, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, you have Thailand, India, Indonesia. All of these countries are joining. I mean, literally by the day, more and more and more are joining. All of them will peg a commodity to a distributed ledger technology, which is the glue that will make it work, giving everyone equal footing and say at the table. It is the rallying cry against the Western hypocrisy, hegemony, sanctions, you name it, freezing of assets, kicking out of SWIFT. That's what gets everyone to the table. What's going to make it work is pegging and pledging commodities to a new distributed ledger technology that the whole world can see. So yes, it's coming. And yes, it's going to work. And yes, it's going to challenge the dollar for world reserve status. It may not happen all at once, but as Zoltan Pozsar has said, he basically said we are entering a new era of backed by commodities, called it Bretton Woods 3, rather than a system dominated by debt instruments and paper. It's about what do you have that's real? And I think that is what this new system will be. And I do believe it will very quickly challenge the dollar for world reserve. And the key to it all is Saudi Arabia and OPEC. Now, we mentioned OPEC, all 13 countries are on the Belt Road. Saudi Arabia has just pledged that they are joining BRICS and has told the world that China is their most important oil trading partner this year and for the next 50. All it will take is for Saudi Arabia and OPEC to announce that, hey, thanks for the memories, West. We are now going to issue oil payment in the new BRICS currency, whatever that is, whenever it comes out. It's going to be any day now. And when that happens like that, everything changes in the West, as the dollar, which has been accumulated for 50 years because it is the sole settlement currency for OPEC. If that changes, the entire world dumps dollars in a matter of seconds. And inflation spikes to the moon, as do interest rates, which are inversely correlated to what makes people feel wealthy in this country, stocks, bonds, and real estate. There's your Klaus Schwab Great Reset. Hope it doesn't happen, but I will tell you that the pieces are rapidly moving into place that says, yeah, it's probably going to happen. So I'm fairly convinced it will.
All right. And what changes the narrative and a lot of that is just the understanding. See, we have very short-term memory. I aired a broadcast back in 2018, so you would be well aware of why these changes are taking place. And a lot of folks didn't realize that during the time when Donald Trump was in office, there was an implementation of a program. And this is imperative because a lot of individuals, again, the writing has been on the wall for a long take a listen to this, because again, if you listen long enough, you'll learn something.
You can also shoot, me an email. You can sign up for the email list. You can make a donation, for consultation. Find all the Instagram, Twitter, Facebook pages for the foundation, all at that one spot, welcometothefoundation.com. You can also check out some past episodes. Give us a second. We're going to upload some more. Honestly, I've been slacking. Real. I want to say peace to all the trustees and all those who have invested in their private education. Salute. Peace to anyone I've done business with in the private. Also, anyone who's made a donation, send an email, send well wishes or current event. Peace to Sister Yvette or anyone who's otherwise added to the foundation. This goes out to you. Also, I'm going to say peace to, my special
soldier takes orders. I'm going to tell you thing that you're doing. You know what, brother? I wouldn't want to be anywhere than right here with the warriors that we all know, that we collaborate with, that we strategize with, and that we make ourselves available to. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. This is where I asked to be, and I definitely think that all of the warriors are in that same, same elk, and they same a cut of that same cloth, and they intentionally wanted to be here. And one of the things I always say is that a soldier can never do what a warrior thinks, because a soldier takes orders. A warrior provides the path to sovereignty and self-determination. So that's who you are to me. And we know many brothers and sisters that are of like mind, like energy. This is why they come to the foundation. They listen, and they are actually enlightened and given an opportunity to question things because of your program and what you do, which is critical because the airways are sacred. The airways are completely sacred, because what it happens is that the airways is a frequency into the mind of the will of the people. And you orchestrate that so well, brother. And I was sitting back, just jamming to the intro, listening to it, and just realizing, man, this is where I want to be. And I want to be here with you and your listeners and the posse of people that we have, that you know of. And I'm looking forward to enduring it all together, because that is what breeds unity. That's what breeds strength. And there is no other stronger than the great will of the great Creator that's been put into us as the image of perfection. And you definitely exemplify that, my brother.
Hey, all praises, to the Creator. I appreciate those words, though, man. Like, that was really, really heartfelt. I'm glad we see eye to eye when it comes to, getting this information out to the overall body of our people. Because as we both know, if you can just hear what we're saying, you will be interested. And if you can get interested and be dedicated and consistent, it will change your life. So, with that being said, I'm going to go into a couple of current events real quick, man.
Sure.
Just bear with me. And if you got anything, that you can throw in, because I just got 4 little articles that I pulled. First, from Reuters, China is going to slap an additional tariffs of $16 billion on U.S. goods. That's 25% on $16 billion worth of U.S. goods, from fuel, steel products to autos and medical equipment. The Chinese Commerce Ministry said, as the world's largest economies escalate their trade dispute. It's a war. We're in trade war. We've been in trade war territory. And, let's just leave it at that. If y'all want to check that out, it's China to slap additional tariffs on $16 billion of U.S. goods. That's on Reuters. I'm going to move forward. I thought this was funny. This is from a couple weeks ago. Trump flags and hats made in China are reportedly being held up at customs as trade war heats up. This cracks me up because, Trump is getting ready, to start his next campaign for presidency, Trump 2020, and to keep America great. Because apparently it's great now. He made it great. But, his campaign stuff is getting held up in customs due to the tariffs and the overall trade wars that are taking place right now. Newsworthy on Newsweek, Saudi Arabia orders 16,000 students to leave Canada amid escalating clash. Saudi Arabia has canceled the scholarships for 16,000 of its students studying in Canada, also ordering them to leave the country and find academic programs elsewhere. The move comes amid growing diplomatic row between the kingdom and the North American country, following comments by Canada's foreign minister that criticized Saudi Arabia's human rights record and called on Riyadh to release detained activists. Responding to the criticism, Saudi Arabia also cut diplomatic ties with Canada, frozen all new trade and investment, and canceled flights via its national carrier to Toronto. You also check that out. There's not only things escalating between the United States and Russia and China, Iran, and Syria, but there's things escalating with Canada and Saudi Arabia. And bottom line, if you look at it, it's, Eastern versus Western that I see being set up, and it just doesn't look good. China's UNIPEC, you can check that out on Newsweek, in regards to Saudi Arabia ordering 16,000 students out of Canada. Next up, Reuters. China's UNIPEC suspends imports of U.S. oil amid growing trade row, cited by sources. UNIPEC is the trading arm of the state oil major, Sinopec. It has suspended imports of crude oil from the United States due to the growing trade war between Washington and Beijing. Three sources familiar with the situation said it's trying to be identified as they are not authorized to speak to the media. Chinese oil buyers had already slowed their purchase of U.S. oil to avoid a likely import tariff threatened by Beijing amid the trade dispute between the world's two largest economies. Y'all can check that out if you want to see more on that article. I also want to say numbers are in. Average home price is up over 5.5%. Average incomes are only up 2.8%. So y'all put that together. If the average home price is up 5.5%, but average incomes are only up 2.8%, and these are government numbers. Do I believe these numbers? No. These are the numbers that I, believe that they're willing to admit to. But if the price of purchasing a home has risen 5.5% and your average income has only risen half of that, you can see what's happening to the middle class. It was quoted to have been said by someone dealing with student loans and how those are calculated, as well as how the housing market was projected, and affordability is at crisis levels. The engine of housing at this point is the first-time home buyer. So it's being let known that the engine of housing is the first-time home buyer. And, right now we're with millennials who, from what I understand from the numbers, are buying less homes than the previous two generations. It might have been combined. New home sales are down 5.3% versus the expected 0.03%. So might be looking at the housing market crash that might be taking place right now. And I guess, that's all I got. Go ahead, brother. That's all I got right now.
I just wanted to add to that. Very, very important. I'm glad you brought that last story up. There's an article that I would just add to this that kind of coincides to what you just said, is that the housing bubble and the housing collapse is about to start. And there was an article on July the 25th of 2018 that came out, and it was put out by BizNow, is the source, and the title of the article is Chinese Investors Do an About-Face Starting Selling U.S. Commercial Properties. Chinese investors pulled back from the United States commercial real estate in a very big way. In the second quarter, buying only $126.2 million worth of properties. At the same time, they sold a total of $1.3 billion worth of U.S. commercial real estate, according to the Real Capitalist Analysis data. Now, that is what is very, very important. See, what happens with a profit, the key to a profit is not where you sell, is where you enter the market. They entered, the Chinese investors entered the market when the overall housing prices were at the bottom. They know that they're at the top right now, and they know everything that's going to happen with the trade wars, with the currency wars, the trade wars that lead into a shooting war. And they know right now is the time to sell those properties. It's not just commercial real estate. They're selling not only commercial real estate, residential real estate. They're selling bonds. They're selling treasury notes. They're selling everything. And what they're doing is that they're taking the overall cash from that and they're repositioning it and re-leveraging it into something else, and other assets that are artificially suppressed right now that are going to explode. And they're going to be the ones that make that happen. And that's a lot about what tonight's show is about. And so I'm so glad that these were the articles that you chose, bro, because the last article is very, very significant to what's really going on and how it plays and how it can affect our everyday listeners and ourselves and our daily lives. Because it is, and it will further affect us going forward. So very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I would like to say, and you'll love this, Brother David, the gold to housing ratio right now is 296.72 to 1.
Right.
And I do want to say for the, which is significant, I do want to say for the, the listeners, all the IBOR contracts that mature in 2021 and after have to be reset. And that's very significant on a level that I don't want to get into right now. I just want to get to the show at this point. So, unless you got any other current events that you want to speak on, brother, I feel like we can move forward.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move forward. But very important. I'm glad you read that, and this is what we need to be getting out to the people. And that overall ratio between gold and homes, it tells a very, very significant story. And history is playing itself out once again. So we're going to jump on that a little bit. What's that?
You want to touch on that, on how history is playing itself out again? Because, I mean...
you know what? Because of the show and how important it is, it kind of plays into this. So I'll bring it back into this. I'll have that flow into tonight's show so that it blends together really, really well. It's really a signal. It's a canary in a coal mine signal that an economic displacement, a huge economic displacement, is about to happen.
Right. Right. Exactly. So obviously, as y'all can tell, we got my good brother David of Wtdta Radio, back with us once again. Tonight we're going to be discussing and going into HR 5404, what it means and what to know. So, we're going to talk about what it is, why does it matter, how does it affect you and your family, and what can you do to protect yourself and your family when this wealth transfer really starts picking up speed, because that's exactly what's going on. What one of the, correlations I like to make with regards to how things are instituted from a control perspective, when you're talking about elite families or whatever, however you want to look at it, Illuminati, I don't care. But is a frog, if you put a frog in the water, and you heat it up over time, you make a flame, and you slowly heat the water up. That frog will sit there and it'll boil to death because it can't distinguish, that the water is being heated up. Because when it got in there, it was cool, and it's a cold-blooded animal, and this is how it works with these types of animals. But if you threw a frog into hot water, it would jump straight out because it would be able to tell the difference in temperature. Whereas a slow rise in temperature, the frog can't distinguish, and it will sit there and boil to death. I mean, it happens for real. You can try it if you want, but it's mean, ultimately, in my opinion. The same thing is with the masses or large amounts of people. Like large amounts of people in the psychology of, the masses or groups has been understood for a long time. And I can push back to just in this era, back to Edward Bernays, who was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, who was the father of corporate marketing in America, and then subsequently was hired by most all major corporations on how to sell products to the masses and how to make commercials and to understand the psychology mostly of the housewife, because back in that time, women predominantly stayed home and took care of the house, so they were watching television, but also, of men as well. So bottom line is that these policies are instituted over time. They're instituted slowly. And if you pay attention, you can see what's happened, but overall, the institution of these policies happens slowly. And that's how governments do it, because they understand the psychology of the mass.
Now let me add to that. Let me kind of give you a scenario of today. People, in my opinion, are like, I'll give you an analogy. It's like the axe convincing the trees to vote for more axes. And remember, an axe is used to cut down trees. It's like an axe convincing a forest of trees that there should be more axes in existence to protect the trees. And how the axe is able to convince the forest of trees to vote for the axes is that the handle of an axe is made of wood. That's how people are, in my opinion, when it comes to politics and a lot of information. See, because the axe handle is made of wood, you're listening to the axe whose sole purpose is to cut down trees. The axe is telling the trees, vote for more axes. See, I'm one of you guys. See my handle? Keep listening, because you listen long enough, you'll learn something.
So when we're discussing this topic, obviously, and specific other topics, when it comes to, economic initiation of policies, you can read in, their documents. The International Monetary Fund says And we went over this, I don't know if it was last week or a week before, but we went over this on, the foundation on how they want to decash society, and they didn't want to do it through decree, a governmental decree. They'd rather have it be adopted gradually and have the banks and service providers and businesses institute and encourage this cashless society through fees imposed and so on and so forth, and have it trickle down slowly versus them, doing a legislative act, off the cuff, and people, too immediate. And humans are creatures of habit. So immediate differences in circumstances or position is very jarring to us, usually. So they understand this, and this is how they're doing this, and they're implementing it, and it's slow. So, there's a lot of people who can be called, whistleblowers or conspiracy theorists or whatever. We see this coming. We can't tell you exactly when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And bottom line is, it's best to be prepared. Prepare for the worst and, hope for the best. And, foundation, we're looking to make sure that you're prepared. So with that being said, how do you want to format this, brother? You want me just to read? Because the bill is short. You want to read the bill? Do you want to? I can let you. You could take over, because these is precious metals, and honestly, I defer to this brother, and I have no problem saying that. So I guess, Brother David, how you want to? What we'll do? I'm just going to hand it off to you. How does that? Okay.
Yeah, that's cool, because what I want to do, and I just want to say, I'm glad that you used that analogy because it's so true. The way in which you control people is through a slow, methodical approach. And you do it through magic, because the key to magic is not to trick you, but to make you believe. To make you think that you have freedom when actually what you have is subjugation and enslavement. And how you do that through energy. You control people's energy. When you control people's energy, you have all of their talents and ability at your full disposal, even to the point where they will deny themselves and will give their single life for your overall agenda. They sell out to what they've been indoctrinated to. They sell out to the boiling water. And so that's very, very true. In today's show, we're going to jump into this now, very important show. And as we started off, we're going to take a look at House Resolution 5404. And what I want to do is I want to go down this line and talk about it and give you an opportunity to see what's going on so that you can make the best decision for you and your family and in your neighborhood, in your community, and the overall collective good of everyone. Because you'll see something that's very telling here. We give seminars throughout the country, and a lot of what's in this bill is what we talk about at our seminars. Because we try to give, and we've been talking about this for a very long time, because the system establishes control over a period of 1,000,000 years. They have their policies and their procedures to be methodically carried out. Their methods is always in the direction of their objectives. And by them having a long-term goals and plans, they put the general population that they're using those objectives against, that is actually the burden bearers of those objectives, they put them on 2 weeks or a month plan. And you can never defeat an enemy in war with a plan of 2 weeks and a month when they've been planning for millions of years. And I do mean millions. So what changes can happen quickly. It's the execution of your free will. And once you start questioning things, you can start to put things into an order that best serves your interests, your family's interests, your community's interests, the human species' interests. And H.R. 5404 is of great concern, but it's telling you so many different things that it's cluing you into how the system views you and uses us, how it views me, and it tries to use me. And that can only happen if I surrender, if I become a soldier to their cause and ignore the warrior that I was called to be. So let's take a look at this. Now, this HR 5404, you can go to congress.gov, and I suggest that you do that. So for those of you that want to reference this, which is always good, you should. Let's go to the source, and it's going to be Congress. And right now, HR 5404 is in the House of Representatives. It was introduced on March the 22nd of 2018. It was introduced by Representative Alexander, a Republican out of West Virginia. Now, I'm a political atheist. I believe that they're all equally worthless. But what I do is I do listen to them for a reason, because a lot of times they'll give you clues and tell you things and reading between the lines on what the agenda is. They may not even know it because they're following the script. So let's go to this House Resolution 5404. And like I said, you could go to congress.gov and just put in HR 5404. Here it goes. HR 5404, to define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold. It's the 115th Congress, second session, to define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold. HR 5404 in the House of Representatives on March 22nd, 2018. Mr. Mooney of West Virginia introduced the following bill, which was referred to the Committee on Financial Services. A bill to define the dollar as a weight of gold, to be enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. Section 1, findings. Here is where we're going to get to the meat, and it's very, very important. Finds the following. Number 1, the United States dollar has lost 30% of its purchasing power since 2000. 30% of the purchasing power since 2000. In this very first statement, they just let you know what they think about you and how they're using you. Here's why that's the case. Since 2000, the dollar has lost 30% of its purchasing power. Who relies on the dollar? And I'm going to tell you, it's not the corporation of the United States. It's you. And the reason why you depend on the dollar is because they have made it so that you have become addicted to it, thinking that it's money when it's not. Never has been, never will be. And it's losing purchasing power. What does that really mean? This is what it means. Is your overall talents and ability and labor force energy losing its value at any time, or is it gaining value? It always gains value. It's not losing value. But what they pay you in, what they give you in exchange for, you give them all of your energy and they give you cash, which is worthless and is losing purchasing power. Now you can see that they're robbing you. They're using an instrument, a debt instrument, and paying for debt to get an asset. This is why they call human resources at corporations, because the humans that work for them are a resource to them. Just like oil, there's natural resources and there's human resources. And they're using and controlling that. And by doing that, they're able to control and not own. They're able to dictate and have prosperity, and they pass out economic they pass out economic plight that will disenfranchise you ever having inheritance to pass on. Passing someone on your cash, leaving them your cash, is not an inheritance. You're passing on debt. It's just like you taking your car note and your mortgage and passing it to them. Here's the mortgage, here's the car note. The burden is now yours because it loses purchasing power. And I know that goes against everything that you've been taught in school that we've been domesticated to, because we've been taught those things in school and domesticated to them because they exploit us. We're basically giving up our priceless energy and receiving nothing in return. Would you work 100 hours, 200 hours, 40 hours for a leaf, a piece of paper? You would exchange all of that energy for a piece of paper. You would say, nowhere in the world. I'm not doing that for that. But that's exactly what we do when we get paid in debt, in cash. And they're telling you right here that it's losing purchasing power. Meaning your overall value of your energy is being siphoned from you, and you're not benefiting from it at all. Ways and means. Our way of life provides for their means of life. It goes on. Number one, and 96% of its purchasing power since the end of the gold standard in 1913. Well, in actuality, it's lost. The dollar, which everybody thinks is cash, everybody thinks is money, has lost over 173% of its purchasing power when you really look at it. See, they create something and not have to give any energy to it. All they do is press a button. It's the printing press button or a computer button, and they can create debt because of the algorithms that they've created. And they do that. They don't have to give up anything. It's just like you. You can make someone give you everything that they own, and you give up nothing. Who's winning and who's losing? Very important. Number two, under the Federal Reserve, 2% inflation objectives. The dollar lost half of its purchasing power every generation of 35 years. They're telling you what they've already intended this to do. They knew this at the Bretton Woods decision. They knew this at the beginning of the financial of man's economy, because they knew, hey, how do we enslave people? We'll make them work for free. Well, how do we make them work for free? Well, you see this piece of paper, or you see this currency, or this or that is not worth anything, but we'll tell them it's worth everything in the world, and they'll do whatever we tell them. They'll give up everything. They'll give up their inheritance and their birthright. They'll kill, maim, and destroy each other in order to have what we have deemed and said is valuable, but we know is worthless. Goes on. Number three, American families need long-term price stability to meet their household spending needs, save money, and plan for retirement. They're basically telling you that there's going to be an economic collapse that is going to get rid of retirement, the savings of what you thought of savings of money, and your household. Quality of life and standard of living is going to be compromised. See, they do this in their writing. Their grimoires and their writings tell a message, but it's not the one that they taught us to read. It's what they taught us not to comprehend in what we read. They're so telling. American families need long-term price stability. What does that mean? There is no price stability. Basically, they're telling you once again, you're getting paid something that has no value. And because of that, you're losing your prosperity. You're under financial servitude, and you don't even know it. Price stability to meet their household spending needs, save money, and plan for retirement. They're saying all of this because they know that they're going to create an economic crisis, and that this bill is going to be their solution to it all. But when they invoke this bill, it's going to be the worst thing that ever happened to us. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute. Number four, the Federal Reserve policy of long-term inflation has made American manufacturing uncompetitive, raising the cost of the United States manufacturing goods in more than 40% since 2000, compared to less than 20% In Germany and France, what are they telling you about? This is the overall trade war. First it was the currency war that turned to a trade war, then it's going to turn into a shooting war. And it's going to be against the East and Germany. And France is going to have to follow where Germany goes. And this is why they named them specifically here. This is what they're going to use as a reason to go to war. And I'm going to tell you something. They don't go to war. They write laws that they don't have to obey. They create debt that they don't have to pay. And they declare wars that they don't have to fight. They make you obey, pay, and fight. And that happens because we allow them. Because we don't know the difference between currency and money. And because of that, we're always in a position of disadvantage from the malevolent fraud of the financial institutions. It goes on. Number 5, between 2000 and 2010, the United States manufacturing employment shrunk by 1/3 after holding steady for 30 years at nearly 20 million jobs. Well, there are going to be plenty of jobs in America after everything is over. Everybody will have a job, but no one will be getting paid anything. What difference if you have a job and you're not getting paid? What difference if you have a good job and they're just paying you a debt instrument that has no intrinsic value? You may think that you have a good paying job, but you don't. It's all fraudulent. And this is why it's so fraudulent, is that they're even telling you that they've created an instrument of counterfeit and fraud, and they give it to the people in exchange for their labor, in exchange for their energy, which is priceless. Number 6. The American economy needs a stable dollar, fixed exchange rate, and money supply controlled by the market, not the government. Well, there is no differentiating, but there is no difference between. You can't differentiate between the government and the corporations. They're one and the same. But what they're admitting here is that things are going to get so bad here that fascism is going to take over. Meaning this is that corporations will dictate the overall policies, procedures, and laws that you'll have to live by. This is why everybody will have a job and they won't get paid anything at all. So they're admitting to here that they're moving towards a fascist state even more than what it is right now. And it says that the American dollar needs the American economy needs a stable dollar, a fixed exchange rate, and money supply controlled by the market, not by the government. See, the money supply that they're talking about is not what you think. They're not talking about cash. They're not talking about currency. The money supply they're talking about is assets, that being you, being one of the assets that they're leveraging. They're leveraging oil, the precious metals, food, water, land, and human resources. That's the money supply. But we think it's something else. We think it's the dollar bill. And because of that, we go to a table that's unevenly yoked, and it's always waged against you. You can never win. You can never get out of it. And they're telling you these things in this overall bill that they're going to pass, in my opinion, in the middle of the night. And when they do pass it in the middle of night because of an emergency economic crisis that has put the nation under such stress of national interest and continuity of government, they're going to enact this. And when they do, it's going to be a trap like no other trap before. Even greater than the overall capturing of spirits, of capturing of souls and capturing of people off of the continent and bringing them here to enslave them. It'll be much greater than that. And we'll get to that as to why as well. So here we go. Continuing. The gold standard means legal tender defined by a convertible into a certain quantity of gold. The gold standard means legal tender defined by convertible into a certain quantity of gold. And I want to just say this. This is very, very important. See, they are going to always be in a position of advantage, and they're always going to exploit you. How much gold and silver do you have? Because this bill is just not about gold. It's more about silver. It actually, if you read this bill correctly, it would actually read that to define the silver as a fixed weight of gold, because the word dollar means silver. But what they're doing here is this. They are going to ensure that they have an asset-based economy, because in having an asset-based economy, they want to make sure that they will always have the momentum and you will actually be hamstrung. How it works is this. How many assets do you have? If you count your home as an asset, you're wrong. It's a liability. If you count your car as an asset, you're wrong. It's a liability. They're all liabilities because they're bonded by debt. Your home is bonded by debt, even if you pay it off. Even if you pay it off. But see, what they did is they made sure that the general population here doesn't have any assets. You all remember about 10 years ago, you saw cash for gold places everywhere, in every strip mall, on every corner, because they knew 10 years or 13 years later they were going to invoke this overall law. And the first thing that they wanted to do is what I call soft mining, take all of the gold from the people, even the scraps of gold from the people, because the scraps of gold are going to be so valuable and the scraps of silver is going to be so valuable that if you have those things, you are going to be able to seize the opportunities from changing from a debt-based economy to an asset-based economy, or the wealth transfer into assets. You will actually be momentumized by that overall transfer because you have an asset. But see, what they did was they ensured that every person here divested themselves of the future. They enslaved the ones that you have yet not named by soft mining, by tricking you and giving up your silver and your gold. We don't even have silverware anymore. It's either plastic or aluminum or whatever it is. It's not silver. So they know their overall money has always been silver and gold, one of the most perfect forms of money. And they've been giving the general population pieces of paper, coupons, that have an expiration date on them, and their redemption is only for so long, but it loses its overall redemption power as it goes along and gets closer to it going to zero. The next one. Under the gold standard, through 1913, the United States economy grew at an annual average. Yeah, you got to go to a commercial?
No. We don't do commercials. I just wanted to state, I wanted to point out something. When it says, the gold standard means legal tender defined by and convertible into a certain quantity of gold. All right? And they spoke about the dollar, earlier. The dollar loses half of its purchasing power every generation. I do want to point out that they haven't, the quantity is not defined. The Constitution says money is gold and silver, and we're discussing the dollar and we're discussing the gold standard, but not the dollar defined. I do want to point that out.
And that's critical. And that's going to definitely come into the last part. That's absolutely true. That's critical. They didn't tell you what that measure was. And that's astute, because that's going to be very, very pivotal, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. Next one, number 9. Under the gold standard, from 1913, the United States economy grew at an annual average of 4%, one-third larger than the growth rate since then, and twice the level since 2000. See, they staged this. All of the financial markets are rigged and fixed and regulated. And that word regulate means to establish control. For who? For them. See, what they did with retirement, pensions, and savings, they said, hey, give us your cash now, give us your energy now, and we promise when you get older and you can't work anymore, we'll have a boatload of cash waiting for you. But they'll give you a boatload of cash, but they won't be able to buy anything. Here's how you can tell that this is happening, and I want to give this thought to you all. I want you to picture this. Tonight, many of us have board games at home. If you don't, go to Walmart, pick up a board game. Pick up a board game, Monopoly, if you still can find it. Take out the overall cash that's there, and then go home, count it all. Take out $400, and then the next morning on your way to work or whatever you do, stop and try to put some gas in your car with that Monopoly money. You'll walk in and they'll say, what is this? We don't accept it. That's exactly what's going to happen with all of the cash that you have and that you've been saving in. It doesn't matter if you got 10 million of it or 100 million of it. All of it is equally worthless. It always has been. It was just a matter of time. You just didn't know when the expiration date was, but they told you it's been losing purchasing power. It's been going to zero. Alan Greenspan said at a congressional meeting, he told Congress that when he was the Fed chairman, Alan Greenspan said, I can give you as much cash as you want. I can project it out as far as you want, but what I can't do is guarantee the purchasing power of it. He told you, I can give you as much paper as you want. You can steal from the people all you want, but they won't be able to buy anything with it. And this is all happening right under our noses because it's intentional. Number 10, the International Gold Exchange Standard from 1914 to 1971 did not provide for the United States dollar convertible into gold, and therefore helped cause the Great Depression and stagflation. What are they saying? They did cash for gold. You give them gold, they give you cash. They would not let you take cash and get gold on the open market. You had to be strategical in when you do that. If you've been doing that, you're wise. What you actually been doing is that you actually have been saving money because you get rid of dollars as soon as you get them, the Federal Reserve notes as soon as you get them, because they are meaningless and worthless. They're not money, and you've been exchanging it for money. They told you the secret right there. Number 11, the Federal Reserve's trickle-down policy of expanding the money supply with no demand for it has enriched the owners of financial assets, but endangered the jobs, wages, and savings of the blue-collar worker. They told you what their plan is. They said the Federal Reserve's trickle-down policy. Who is the Federal Reserve? I don't know exactly who they are. It's a private organization, but I will say this. It's probably made up of the original founding fathers of this country and their families. It's probably made up with all of the major banking corporations throughout the world, the central bank. It's made up with all the government entities. That's who the Federal Reserve is. And they created a policy, a trickle-down policy. See, they trickle down because it's a methodical, slow approach to boiling you. And before you know it, you cooked. And by doing that, they've enriched themselves. And they said it here, with no demand for it, it has enriched the owners of financial assets. What are financial assets? They're not talking about what we consider consumerism. They're talking about real assets. They're talking about oil. They're talking about farmable land. They're talking about water. They're talking about the precious metals. And they're talking about food. And they're talking about citizens. Those are the assets that they've enriched themselves. But it endangers the job, wages, and savings of the blue-collar worker. That would be the common person. That's the economy that's going to collapse. The economy is not going to collapse. It's the common person's economy that's going to collapse. That's what they're telling you here in H.R. 5404. Number 12, restoring America's middle class prosperity requires a change in monetary policy authorized to Congress in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the Constitution. Restoring America's middle class prosperity requires change in the monetary policy authorized to Congress. See, it sounds good, but they know you're not ready. Because the Constitution wasn't written for you. The Constitution was only written for the founders and their overall families, and they were we the people that put it into the Constitution. That's who the Constitution has always been for and will always protect. It will never protect the citizen. How do you know it'll never protect the citizen? Because a citizen is not paid what a constitutional member is paid. A constitutional member is paid gold and silver coin only. It's still in the Constitution today. But they send you what? Cash, checks, debt instruments.
It's hard to believe that a lot of guys get this. And this broadcast that you're listening to was 2018. So all of that, what you just heard, was the whole, what was, it's more to it than, I'm going to get to it, but I'm just kind of give you a precursor. This is back in 2018 when HR 5404 was brought into play. It was a 30-month program. Count the months from March 23rd, 2018 to the day. Aren't we past the 30 months? And if we are, and you never read HR 5404, then you are actually in the middle of the world's largest bank run in history. And you're sitting around like Johnny Bench. And again, no shot, no pun intended for my sports fans. I used to play sports. I used to wrestle, all that kind of stuff. But you know more about who's going to the Super Bowl in 2023 than what's going on all around you. What Brother Dave just brought to you in 2018 is exactly what's being played out. And they used the pandemic, your fear, and your unwillingness to learn what you need to learn. And you're in the middle of the world's longest bank run. I'm going to drop something on you because, like I said, if you keep listening long enough, you'll learn something. Now, keep in mind, we've been talking about this stuff for a while. And some of the folks that back in 2018 wasn't paying attention, well, check this out. I can't make this up.
So, we all really about to just sit here and act like it's okay that we can't cash check?
So we all gonna sit here and act like you weren't warned? We all gonna sit here and act like everybody didn't know that banks had to be Basel IV compliant by the 2nd, January 2nd, 2023. No, you didn't know because y'all called us conspiracy theorists. Y'all called us everything but the child of God. And everything that we say now, y'all starting to see. But it's too late now. It's too late. Yes, that's why you're having a difficult time. And those of you who are going to the ATMs and you're going in and you see the little thing that says we're having technical issues and you can't get money out of the bank. The technical issue is they are not Basel IV compliant. They cannot give you cash because they don't have anything to back it up. They are on a fiat system. If y'all don't understand financial literature, jump into something. Just start learning. Just look up terms of financial literature if you don't know nothing else. You feel what I'm saying? I mean, literally, Google terms of financial literature. I mean, it's so many ways to educate yourself, but y'all gonna lose out. Now, I'm gonna say this one more time, okay? We are on a fiat system. That means when all this shit, all this cryptocurrency that everybody is trying to go, no. They just give these motherfuckers 5 years to be compliant. The deadline was last year. This year, January 2nd, 2023 was the deadline. Now, you might hear the media talk about 5 years and all this. Believe it if you want to. If it's in 5 years, why you can't get your money out the bank? Why you can't get cash from the bank? All right? So you better take what little assets you got and get you some supplies and prep. And fast as fuck.
So, like, we all...
What's interesting about that is this is a person who's more on the debtor side of things. Light bulb don't come on. And everybody now is starting to figure out they ain't in Kansas no more. Now, I'm going to go back to Brother Dave because he going to give you some jewels and he going to drop this knowledge on you. Because, see, this was put out back in 2018. But I'm also go back to the executive for Vancouver Research and Investment Conference because he's finna say something very intriguing. Keep listening because if you listen long enough, you'll learn something.
Well, let's talk about central bank digital currencies, because according to an article on Decrypt, mainstream financial institutions in the U.S. are working with the Federal Reserve to test a digital currency platform. I'm wondering how you compare that with the BRICS nations' currencies, because you mentioned the Chinese digital yuan, which is kind of a form of CBDC. So are there any concerns there in terms of surveillance or having maybe a Chinese government influence over the BRICS nations' currencies? And how much of a threat do you think CBDCs in general will be? And do you think they will be successful in launching them in a place like America and a place like Canada?
Yeah, I do. I mean, first of all, you have something in terms of the BRICS and the Chinese central bank digital currency. You know, again, I think it will be it will be not administered per se by China. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I think it will be the rails. The technology will be the rails for which the BRICS currency runs upon. I don't know what Chinese, if there would be anything that would be untoward or meddling or you know, that I guess that remains to be seen. That's a little outside my bailiwick, but I will tell you that they've been working on this for a very, very long time. In fact, just last month finished a trial. I think it was like a 40-day trial of a technology called the M-Bridge, which is the ability for countries to trade central bank digital currencies instantly, where settlement happens immediately. And it was a trial between China, United Arab Emirates, and I want to say Singapore, the three countries, and they did, you know, millions of dollars in transactions that were successful. All of them, by the way, usurping or sidestepping the SWIFT system or the intermediary U.S. intermediary banks. So here you have a testing of central bank digital currencies that can go cross-border because I think there will be more than just a BRICS currency. There will be other central bank digital currencies. In fact, the Bank of International Settlements told all of their member banks that every country must have an operational CBDC by 2025. So, this new test that's going on between, MasterCard and all the big commercial banks here in the U.S., along with the Fed, doing a beta test, if you will. They're basically accounting of their books now and moving it over to a distributed ledger to do a test to make sure that it works. It's
thought to you all. I want you to picture this. Tonight, many of us have board games at home. If you don't, go to Walmart, pick up a board game. Pick up a board game Monopoly if you still can find it. Take out the overall cash that's there, and then go home, count it all. Take out $400, and then the next morning on your way to work or whatever you do, stop and try to put some gas in your car with that Monopoly money. You'll walk in and they'll say, "What is this? We don't accept it." That's exactly what's going to happen with all of the cash that you have and that you've been saving in. It doesn't matter if you got 10 million of it, 100 million of it. All of it is equally worthless. It always has been. It was just a matter of time. You just didn't know when the expiration date was, but they told you it's been losing purchasing power. It's been going to zero. Alan Greenspan said at a congressional meeting, he told Congress that when he was the Fed chairman, Alan Greenspan said, "I can give you as much cash as you want. I can project it out as far as you want, but what I can't do is guarantee the purchasing power of it." He told you, I can give you as much paper as you want. You can steal from the people all you want, but they won't be able to buy anything with it. And this is all happening right under our noses because it's intentional. Number 10, the International Gold Exchange Standard from 1914 to 1971 did not provide for the United States dollar convertible into gold, and therefore helped cause the Great Depression and stagflation. What are they saying? They did cash for gold. You give them gold, they give you cash. They would not let you take cash and get gold on the open market. You had to be strategical in when you do that. If you've been doing that, you're wise. What you actually been doing is that you actually have been saving money, because you get rid of dollars as soon as you get them, the Federal Reserve notes as soon as you get them, because they are meaningless and worthless. They're not money, and you've been exchanging it for money. They told you the secret right there. Number 11, the Federal Reserve's trickle-down policy of expanding the money supply with no demand for it has enriched the owners of financial assets, but endangered the jobs, wages, and savings of the blue-collar worker. They told you what their plan is. They said the Federal Reserve's trickle-down policy. Who is the Federal Reserve? I don't know exactly who they are. It's a private organization, but I will say this. It's probably made up of the original founding fathers of this country and their families. It's probably made up with all of the major banking corporations throughout the world, the central bank. It's made up with all the government entities. That's who the Federal Reserve is. And they created a policy, a trickle-down policy. See, they trickle down because it's a methodical, slow approach to boiling you. And before you know it, you cooked. And by doing that, they've enriched themselves. And they said it here, with no demand for it, it has enriched owners of financial assets. What are financial assets? They're not talking about what we consider consumerism. They're talking about real assets. They're talking about oil. They're talking about farmable land. They're talking about water. They're talking about the precious metals. And they're talking about food. And they're talking about citizens. Those are the assets that they've enriched themselves. But it endangers the job, wages, and savings of the blue-collar worker. That would be the common person. That's the economy that's going to collapse. The economy is not going to collapse. It's the common person's economy that's going to collapse. That's what they're telling you here in H.R. 5404. Number 12, restoring America's middle-class prosperity requires a change in monetary policy authorized to Congress in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the Constitution. Restoring America's middle-class prosperity requires change in the monetary policy authorized to Congress. See, it sounds good, but they know you're not ready. Because the Constitution wasn't written for you. The Constitution was only written for the founders and their overall families, and they were we the people that put it into the Constitution. That's who the Constitution has always been for and will always protect. It will never protect a citizen. How do you know it'll never protect a citizen? Because a citizen is not paid what a constitutional member is paid. A constitutional member is paid gold and silver coin only. It's still in the Constitution today. But they send you what? Cash, checks, debt instruments, because you're the slave and the burden bearer of the Constitution. And this isn't just something that we're making up. It's right here in front of you. If they haven't taught you this, because they don't want you to know that we've been deceived. Deceptive measures have kept us impoverished because they created an economy that was absent of the great creator's intention. They became the money changers. They changed money. They changed our belief and our thoughts of money through magic. They made us believe a piece of paper was money. It's so indoctrinated and so ingrained in our thoughts, and we're so embedded with it that it's hard to believe that this could ever happen because it's always been there. For I've always been able to buy something for it. That always ends because every single form of currency throughout human history has gone to zero. It returns to its intrinsic value of zero. The U.S. dollar is no exception. They're actually telling you this in this bill. Money does grow on trees. The bankers created that slogan that money don't grow on trees so that they can embed in you the thought process that's right, because it can only be a piece of paper. Hate to tell y'all, they lied. Money does grow on trees. It's called peaches, it's called oranges, it's called pears. That's the great creator, God Almighty's economy, the ecosystem. It provides sustainability so that you'll never have to pay taxes or work for anybody. You can be a warrior that maintains their sovereignty and self-determination. Come the burden bearers of the slave of the economy. This is the truth. So whenever somebody tells you that money doesn't grow on trees, they're either lying or they're ignorant to the difference between currency and money. Most likely it's the latter. But depending on who it is that you're talking to, they may actually be lying. Because money does grow on trees. So, almost finished. Very important. This is very important. We need to talk about how this is going to affect us. It goes on. Now, Section 2, define the dollar into terms of gold. Effective 30 months after the date of enactment of this act, meaning after this act becomes law, the Secretary of the Treasury in this act, referred as Secretary, shall define the dollar in terms of a fixed weight of gold based on that day's closing price of gold, and the Federal Reserve Bank shall make Federal Reserve notes exchangeable with gold at the statutory gold definition of the dollar. What are they saying there? They're going to give you 30 months. Here's the key. 30 months to convert and to make this overall change in the overall economy that's here. But in that change, the conversion rate is going to be what kills you. And this is what they know. It all sounds good, but this is a death warrant and this is an economic death warrant that they're signing against you. And they realize that every citizen is a dead person walking economically because of this. You don't have any assets. And they're going to an asset-based economy. In the new asset-based economy, it won't matter what your credit score is. You can have an 875 credit score, 1,000 credit score. It will mean nothing. Your overall pay history could be that you've never missed a payment in 100 years. That won't matter. The only thing that matters, that matters in a debt-based economy. In an asset-based economy, this is the only thing that matters is one question. What assets do you have to collateralize your monetary direction? And you can't say Jordans. And you can't say red bottom, because those are all consumer goods. They're not assets. They have no intrinsic value. And they know that the general population has no assets. All they have is debt. And this is what's going to happen. They're going to say that there's a conversion rate. The new dollar is now backed by gold and silver. In order for you to get that, you're going to have to trade in $30,000 to $100,000 of the old debt instruments or the old dollars for the new ones, and you're going to get $30,000 to $100,000 for just one of those. Do you know what that's going to do to every person here that doesn't have assets? It's going to shut the bar to where you'll never ever be able to get out of the economic cash system, because there will be a fight throughout the world for assets. And if you don't have any assets to leverage to acquire more assets, you won't be able to use a debt instrument to get any assets. They won't be accepting your monopoly money for anything. And this is why this bill is going to completely disenfranchise everyone that doesn't have assets. And they're telling you that. See, they always tell you before they do it. It's a sick part of their satanic rituals that they follow. They got to tell you what they're going to do to you so that you'll be a willful participant through ignorance. And they can always make the claim they knew or should have known. Number 3, during the 30-day month period following the date of enactment of this act, the United States government shall take timely and reasonable steps to disclose all of its holdings of gold, together with a compensatory report of any U.S. government purchases or sales, this enhancing the ability of the market and the market participants. Who are the market participants? It won't be anybody that's a debt slave. It will only be individuals that now the economy needs. An economy always needs assets. It uses assets to exploit the debtors and to arrive at a fixed dollar gold parity in an orderly fashion. Here's the problem with that. Most of the gold that the U.S. has is either stolen from its citizens or stolen from other nations. And the other nations are going to tell the U.S., hey, you can't go on the gold standard until you give us back our gold. This is why Germany is talked about in this overall bill, because Germany repatriated their gold from the U.S. and they were pissed. They were so pissed they had to kill Gaddafi. They killed Gaddafi to pay Chavez. They invaded and they created, through the Nazis, destabilized the Ukraine to start the payments to Germany. Then they allowed a Hurricane Sandy to go through New York to delay that process even further. They steered a hurricane through Manhattan to prevent the overall payment or disclosure of the German gold. This is why they hate Germany now. Because Germany called their bluff. It was the French that called Nixon's bluff, or the U.S.'s bluff, that caused Nixon to close the gold window. It was France that did it. And this is why France and Germany is named in this overall bill. Not a coincidence. And when these other countries are going to demand their gold back and the U.S. is going to say no, and you know what they're going to have a response to? It's going to be a military response, but it's going to be the worst kind of military response. It's not going to be by warships or bullets. It's going to be by cyber attack. Not only will you be going through the worst economic collapse ever, but you'll be going through that economic collapse in a grid down situation where the lights won't be on. All of these things are being put into place. And it all has to do with the precious metals. Obama signed a law before he left office. Celebrity figurehead Obama signed into law where you can look it up for yourself, where private citizens and corporations can go out into space and to mine celestial bodies. He signed that into law. Why did he do that? Because the overall precious metals, the earth doesn't produce precious metals. The earth isn't yielding any precious metals. The earth produces oil and water. It produces that. The lies that they told you scientifically how oil gets on the planet is a lie. But see, the precious metals is extraterrestrial. It has to come to the earth from outside of the earth's atmosphere. And they've mined all of that. And the one that they've mined all of it of is not gold. See, they connected everyone to gold so that you would ignore the truth. And the truth is silver. They don't have any more silver. This is why Obama signed into law that corporations can go into space to mine celestial bodies, planets, and meteorites. And then Trump announced the overall space marine recently. One president did a little bit, the next one does another. It's a slow process. No one ever sees what's happening. What are they doing? They don't have any more silver on this planet. Now they got to go to the moon and to Mars to get it. And when they harvest that overall silver from the moon, do you think that they're going to allow the overall pricing of it and the value of it to come back here to be where it is right now? Absolutely not. Because silver is a critical, it's more valuable than all of the precious metals combined. No silver, no economy. Many of you may not even be aware of how important silver is. No silver, you couldn't exist. But I want to stay here on this 5404 because it's very important. They've enacted this, and it's in Congress right now, and it's going to be passed, and I think it's going to be passed, and it's waiting to be passed when the appropriate moment of crisis comes. They'll never let a good crisis go to waste. There's going to be an economic crisis, and this is going to be the remedy. And they're going to blame the East, China, and the BRIC nations, and that's going to perpetuate the war that they're going to lose. And the U.S. will be put under receivership, and the states will start to untie itself.
Coming, there's no question about it. On one hand, the Federal Reserve wants it so that they can enact monetary policy directly to the public, where they don't have to have the commercial banks lending money into existence. And you can see this by the huge amount, over $2 trillion in the reverse repo market. What that basically is telling you is that the banks would rather give their money to the Fed earning 4% with no risk than lend it out to any of the people in the country for a home loan or a car loan or a home equity or mortgage, whatever it may be. There's more risk is what that is telling you. The banks see more risk by lending it out to the public than giving it to the Fed. So that's not what the Fed wants to see. See, when the Fed creates these or buys the bonds, creates money to buy the bonds from the banks have two options. They can either lend it out to the public, which is how money is created through credit cards and loans and whatnot, or give it to the Fed in a reserve account earning 4% with no risk right now, 3-4%. So when you see over $2 trillion in there, the Fed, if they want to either increase velocity or decrease velocity, they can do it directly to the public through people's iPhone or through their smartphone. The way that it is right now, they are reliant upon the commercial banking system. So that's one reason that the Fed's going to like it. to your point, I think the IRS and the government would like it for another reason, and that is for scrutiny. And certainly there's no way to hide when you have no cash, when you are everything you do is on a distributed ledger, whether it be paying the babysitter or losing $50 on the golf course to your buddies or whatever it may be, going to collecting money at a garage sale or whatnot. There is no way to hide. And when you see, now a $600 1099 trigger using things like Venmo and Zelle and whatnot, the walls are closing in, no question about it. It's kind of a dual deal here where on one hand, yes, we will lose all privacy. On the other hand, the Fed would like to be able to enact monetary policy. It's coming. Whether or not it's backed by gold in this country remains to be seen. Would not surprise me one bit at all in terms of a reactionary policy by the Fed. They would have to back it by gold or pledge it to something, back it by something, if indeed the BRICS nations do issue a commoditized currency, because who in their right mind would want to invest in treasuries of this country or anything in this country when interest rates are well above or well below rather the rate of inflation, and we are an insolvent country. When you factor in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions on top of a $30 trillion debt, we're at $150 trillion. And a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. This country is insolvent. This country is broke. And if you issue a new currency by a group of countries that are trying to be transparent with this distributed ledger technology, showing the world what is pegged, who pegged it, who pledged it, it's a whole new system that we are walking into where it will not be dominated by the West if that happens. And the only way they're going to be able to make it work would be to follow suit and with great transparency, roll out a central bank digital currency. What better way to do it than to say, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pledge it to gold. And then that gets into a whole thing that we probably don't have time to talk about, which is the governor of the Dutch National Bank, who just came out and said, all of us have something called gold revaluation account on our balance sheet. Most of the gold held in Europe and the U.S. is valued at $35 an ounce. In the U.S., I think it's $42.22. But that goes back to Bretton Woods. So you got all these countries like the Netherlands who have all of this gold on their balance sheet, which is not allowed to be offset against liabilities. It has to stay there on its own, but valued at $35 an ounce. And it's in something called a gold revaluation account. Well, what if they were to put it up to $5,000 an ounce and peg it right there to a new system? At $5,000 an ounce, it makes their balance sheet solvent. At $35 an ounce, and you can't even use it on the balance sheet, it doesn't. But you put it at $5,000 and allow it to be pledged against liabilities, all of a sudden, all of these countries, the U.S. included, go from completely insolvent to solvent. So is that part of the plan? Is that why gold was reclassified Tier 1? Is that why we're seeing a massive exodus out of COMEX and the London Metals Exchange, where central banks are accumulating it and repositioning it? Is that why we're seeing this? And I would argue it is. And in particular, if you look at the countries that are joining the BRICS nations, their amount of gold purchases, and in many cases, their allocation in terms of the percentage of their gold holdings as a percentage of reserves is startling. Let me just read you a couple of them. Venezuela, their gold holdings represent 82% of their reserves. Uzbekistan, 65%. Kazakhstan, 63%. Bolivia, 55%. Lebanon, 49%. Belarus, 40%. Turkey, who bought more gold than any country in the world the first 7 months of 2022, 29%. Kazakhstan, 22%. And the list goes on and on. These are all the countries that have either pledged or said they are going to join BRICS nations. They're massively accumulating and increasing their gold holdings, which represent a substantial part of their reserves. Is that because they were told if you want a seat at the table, you need to have gold because it will be pledged to a new system? I would argue, hell yes. Why are all of these countries like Germany and the Netherlands and Austria and Poland and Hungary? Why are they all accumulating gold and repatriating it? Why? Why are they holding it instead of leaving it at the Fed and the Bank of England where they have greater liquidity? These movements, why was gold reclassified Tier 1? Why did the central banks do all of their repatriation before it was announced? These things put together make it very obvious to me that gold will be part of a new system. It will be pegged to a new system. It will be revalued. When it happens, how it all plays out, I think is debatable. But when you see the biggest money in the world draining the supply from top on down, when the price isn't doing anything, yet you see massive short positions on COMEX, which enable the price to be suppressed, put it all together and you are seeing the biggest money in the world is using price suppression to front run a new system that is coming. And you can see it by the central bank's accumulation and repatriation. They're telling you, we don't just do this for the hell of it. We are clued into what's coming, and this is why gold is becoming so important to what we're doing. Now, they're not saying that, but their actions are betraying their rhetoric, and their actions are saying exactly that. Gold is where you need to be.
Very fascinating. It'll be so interesting to see how this all plays out. The VRIC is coming up January 20th.
This is why the states are running right now frantically to establish gold and silver in precious metal depositories. Texas was the first one to open up 2 months ago because they know where it's coming. You don't, because they don't tell you. So this is more than important. And I know that we're running out of time, but I wanted to just express this to you on what's happening. Here's the critical part before if you have any questions or any comments about it. The overall, China, the BRIC nation, have already determined that the U.S. will be on a gold standard. The U.S. has been trying to delay it as long as they can because they don't have the gold. They have the gold, they don't have the silver. And the gold that they have is stolen. And they know that they've created far too much debt and they can't pay back the overall debt, and there's not going to be a debt jubilee. It's not going to be a debt jubilee. Debt is never forgiven. It's either defaulted on or paid off in man's economy. It should be forgiven in the great creator's economy. It's known as the Shemitah. But let me get back to what this is really about. Right now, the East has already decided that the U.S. economic time is up. So much so that some of the Forex trading or some of the currencies that selective individuals out of the East can acquire is known. There's something that's called the USN, the U.S. note. You won't find it talked about officially here in the United States. Obama was supposed to announce it at the Treasury. He was there with Dunford, Loretta Lynch, and Jack Lew, and then he instead of following that script, which was smart, he started to talk about something else because he didn't want to be the one that introduced the USN. Why? When he was leaving. It was a smart choice. I'm not going to let them know that it's about to go, the lights is about to get cut out on them. So, in Asia, some of the influential banks for selective individuals have something called the USN. And here's the key with the USN. It's kind of like this. You can use dollars to get yuans, to get yens, to get British pounds, to get Russian rubies, to get all of the currencies of the world. You can buy and sell those currencies for U.S. dollars, or you can buy and sell U.S. dollars in those to get those currencies, however you would like to do it. And it goes all the way down, and there's a bank out of Hong Kong called DBS. And they have in their listings, I've sent it to many people, And in this listing, it says the USD, and then just below the USD, it has something called the USN. The USN is the gold-backed note of the United States Treasury. But the general population can't get it. But the thing that's so important and the thing that's telling about this is that it says this. It says USN and USD to buy or sell NA. Meaning the NA is non-applicable. Meaning you can't use US dollars to get the USN. One of the things that China said is that when they go to the gold standard, they will not allow any country or any individual to use the US dollar to acquire the gold-backed currency. And they went even so far as saying you won't be able to buy gold or silver with the US dollar. Because they're not going to allow you to exchange nothing for something. They're not going to let you to develop a cash for gold scheme against them like they did to you. And what
now, throughout 2022, this was the repetitive message that we try to teach through our trustee training and so forth. So going into 2023, if you've been paying attention to the debt clock and the manipulation of the paper to gold ratio and the paper to silver ratio, then you're well aware that they are already implementing current expected credit loss provisions. And you need to be on point because the time is up. Hopefully this information has put you in the right frame of mind. We have publications, ebooks, private courses and classes that will be made readily available upon request. 365 Live, which is our flagship broadcast, will provide this information in its entirety. We also have other affiliate links that are on various different servers. If you are actually listening to this broadcast, you are the resistance. If you want more exclusive information on more exclusive content, courses, classes, and so forth to get you and your family on the right side of history, then whoever referred you to this link, I suggest you reach out to us. My office number is 904-490-0297, and we're open from the times of 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please feel free to reach out. Someone, if you make a call and you're not able to reach someone directly, preferably leave a message and or text. Someone will return your call shortly. These are exciting times to be alive, so don't get it twisted. But we got a lot of work to do. Remember, all I'm offering is truth, nothing more, nothing less. Peace and love, family. Peace and love.
You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I won't have it. Is that clear? You think you merely stopped a business deal? That is not the case. The Arabs have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must put it back. It is ebb and flow, tidal gravity. It is ecological balance. You are an old man who thinks in terms of nations and peoples. There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems. One vast and immane, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, Reichmarks, rims, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today. That is the atomic and subatomic and galactic structure of things today. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone.